Your brother's share of the company goes to expanding the Westbrook location, my father said, setting down his fork like he was announcing the weather. We've already filed the paperwork. Congratulations to Elliot on the new venture. I stared at him across the table. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the chandelier too bright, the smell of my mother's pot roast turning my stomach. My brother sat to my father's left, swirling his wine, not quite smiling but not smiling either. That's my equity, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Dad, that's the 20% you put in my name when I turned 21. You told me it was mine. My father finally looked at me. His expression was patient in the way a man is patient when he's already made a decision and just needs the other person to catch up. It was always a family asset, sweetheart. The trust structure allows for reallocation when the board agrees. Your brother needs capital to scale. You have a salary. You're comfortable. My mother refilled her glass. She didn't look at me either. Elliot finally put down his wine. It's not like relieving you is nothing. You still have your position at the firm. The position you gave me, I said. Which you earned, he said, like he was being generous. I had earned it. I was a licensed CPA with 8 years of experience, 3 of them spent pulling my family's real estate development company out of a tax liability nightmare that my brother had created by misreporting contractor payments for 2 straight years. I had fixed it quietly without credit because that was what you did when it was family. I kept my head down. I trusted the structure. I trusted the paperwork with my name on it. I want to see the filing, I said. My father's jaw tightened. This isn't the place you told me at dinner. This is exactly the place. My mother set her glass down a little harder than necessary. Callie, your brother has a real opportunity here. The Westbrook market is growing. If you love this family, you support each other. That word, support, like I hadn't spent the last 3 years being the invisible scaffolding holding up a building everyone else got to live in. I left before dessert. I drove home with the windows down and my hands gripping the wheel and a very specific, very cold feeling settling into my chest. Not just anger, something more useful than anger. I thought I knew what I was dealing with. A family that had always tilted toward my brother, a trust document that had a clause I hadn't read closely enough, a reallocation I could fight in probate court with the right attorney. I thought it was about money. I didn't understand yet that it was about survival, mine specifically, and that they had been planning this for longer than I knew. The attorney I hired told me the news on a Tuesday morning in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and mild panic. The reallocation is valid, she said, sliding the filing across the table. Your father exercised a management clause in the original trust structure. Because you never converted it to a personal holding account after you turned 25, the clause remained active. I didn't know to convert it, I said. No one told me. She looked at me with the careful expression of someone who had seen this before. I know. That's not uncommon in family trusts. The question is whether there was any deceptive intent in the original structuring. I drove home thinking about that word, deceptive. It felt too clean for what my family was. They hadn't tricked me. They had simply never told me the truth, which is different, apparently, in the eyes of the law. I called my brother that night. I shouldn't have. I know that now. I just want to understand how this happened, I said. Walk me through it. There was a pause on the other end. Elliot was always good at pauses. He used them the way other people used words, to fill space, to buy time, to make you feel like the conversation was going somewhere when it wasn't. Dad made a business decision, he said finally. You should talk to him, not me. Did you know about this before that dinner? Another pause. Callie, I think you need to take some time before you do anything you regret. I hung up. 2 days later, my access badge for the firm stopped working. I stood at the lobby entrance for a full 30 seconds, swiping the card and watching the lights stay red before the receptionist, a young woman named Beth, who had always smiled at me in the elevator, looked at the floor instead of at me. HR called me up to the 4th floor. My supervisor was there, and a woman from legal I had never seen before. We've received some concerns, my supervisor said. He didn't look comfortable. He was a decent man, and I think he knew what was happening, but decency doesn't always come with courage. About the Hargrove account, There's an allegation that certain records were altered. I didn't alter anything, I said. There's documentation suggesting otherwise. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were screenshots of spreadsheets I didn't recognize, formatted to look like my work, with my initials in the metadata. These are fabricated, I said. My voice was very quiet. Your father contacted the firm this morning, the legal woman said. He's a significant client. He expressed concerns about your mental state and your handling of certain accounts. Given the sensitive nature of the financial data you have access to, we're placing you on administrative leave pending review. I thought about my brother's pause on the phone 2 days ago. Take some time before you do anything you regret. They had been ready. I had given them the signal by calling and they had moved. The next 3 weeks were a specific kind of hell that I don't think I have the right words for. Even now. My mother posted on Facebook, actually posted publicly with a photo of our family at Christmas 2 years ago, asking for prayers for our family during this painful time, hinting at a loved one struggling with the pressures of work and some troubling behavior. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. People who knew us knew exactly who she meant. My cousin texted me, "Are you okay? Your mom is worrying everyone." A former colleague sent a screenshot of a Glassdoor review that had gone up the same week, anonymous, describing an unnamed female employee at my firm who had fabricated records and shown erratic behavior. It had 27 upvotes. My brother, meanwhile, launched a crowdfunding page for the Westbrook expansion. It raised $40,000 in 8 days. Investors called it a family-led vision with deep roots in the community. My father gave a quote about legacy. My mother was photographed at the ribbon cutting. I was not in any of the photos. I was in my apartment, eating whatever I could find in the back of my freezer, reading every document I could access through the Secretary of State's business filings portal. Because if I was going to be destroyed, I was going to understand why. What I found took me 4 days to fully map out. The Westbrook location wasn't just a restaurant expansion. Elliott had incorporated a separate holding company for it, Westbrook Capital Partners LLC, and the initial funding structure looked clean on the surface. But the money flowing into it didn't match the revenue from our family's existing properties. The numbers were off by a significant amount, routed through a management fee structure that charged Westbrook Capital for consulting services from a second entity I had never heard of, Grayfield Advisory Group. I searched Grayfield. It was registered in Delaware. The registered agent was a law firm. The beneficial owners weren't listed. I searched deeper. I found a state contractor database. I found a city housing grant, federal money administered at the state level that had been awarded to a development project 2 years ago. The project manager of record was Grayfield Advisory Group. The project had reported completion. The inspections had been signed off. I pulled satellite imagery of the address. The lot was empty. It had been empty for 2 years. My father's construction company had received a federal housing grant for a project that did not exist, and the money had been routed through Grayfield, then into Westbrook Capital, then used, partially, to fund my brother's restaurant expansion. And on the incorporation documents for Westbrook Capital Partners LLC, listed as the chief financial officer, was my name. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't been asked. But there it was. They hadn't just taken my equity. They had made me the paper trail. I called my father. I know I shouldn't have, but I was shaking and the walls of my apartment were very close and I needed to hear his voice say it wasn't what I thought it was. I found the Grayfield filing, I said. I know about the housing grant. I know about the empty lot. The silence on his end was different from my brother's silence. My father's silences were never uncertain. This one was just him deciding how much to say. You've been busy, he said. Take my name off the filing. All of it, return my equity, and I walk away. I'll sign whatever you need. A soft sound almost like a laugh. Check the Secretary of State portal, he said. The one you've been using. Look at today's filings. I refreshed the page while we were still on the phone. A new document. Filed that morning. An amended operating agreement for Westbrook Capital Partners with a notarized addendum. The addendum was a statement. signed by me, witnessed by a notary, dated 3 weeks ago, in which I acknowledged that I had misappropriated consulting fees from the Westbrook Capital account to fund personal obligations. The notary seal was from a firm I had never visited. The signature looked exactly like mine. "If you go to anyone," my father said, "you're not a whistleblower, Callie. You're the CFO who embezzled from her own family's company. I have the documents. I have a lawyer who will bury you in litigation for 4 years. By the time it's over, you won't have a license left." He hung up. I sat on the floor of my kitchen. I don't know how long. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn. The world was completely indifferent to the fact that I had just been handed my own obituary by the man who used to drive me to swim practice on Saturday mornings. I think about that night sometimes. The specific quality of that floor under my hands, the way normal life just kept happening outside my window. It was the lowest I have ever been, and I stayed there until I could get up. Desperation is clarifying in a way that comfort never is. I spent the next 2 weeks at the public library and at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and I stopped thinking about what I had lost and started thinking about what I had overlooked. My father was meticulous but not technical. He understood real estate relationships and leverage. What he did not fully understand was digital infrastructure. He had forged documents, but documents leave trails. Notary records are public. Grant applications go through federal portals, and federal housing grants administered by state agencies are subject to the Inspector General's office. I wasn't going to a local attorney. I wasn't going to the police. I was going to write the most detailed, sourced, and organized report that my 8 years of financial work could produce, and I was going to send it to the HUD Office of Inspector General. But I needed one more thing. The forged signature on that notarized addendum was good. It was very good. But whoever had done it had made one mistake that I only noticed because I know my own signature, the way I know my own face. The loop on my lowercase g closes from the left. Always. I've done it that way since 3rd grade. Some muscle memory thing my handwriting teacher pointed out once. On the forged signature, the loop closed from the right, 1 letter. But I needed to be able to prove the original, and I didn't have a reference document that a court would accept. Then I remembered the storage unit. When my grandmother, my father's mother, passed 4 years ago, I had been the one to handle her affairs, not my father, not my brother, me. Because I was the one who showed up, I had packed her files in 2 boxes, inventoried them, put them in a storage unit I had been paying $40 a month for ever since, meaning to deal with them and never quite finding the time. I drove there on a Wednesday morning. In the 3rd box, between her utility bills from 2019 and a folder of birthday cards she had saved, I found what I hadn't known I was looking for. My grandmother had kept every document I had ever signed for her. Power of attorney for her medical decisions, which I had done at 24, a signature card for her bank account, where I was listed as a secondary holder, a letter I had written her when I passed my CPA exam, which she had apparently treated as a legal document worth preserving. And in that letter, in my own handwriting from 6 years ago, the lowercase g closing from the left. I sat in that storage unit for a long time. She had saved everything. She had always believed in keeping records, had always said that paper doesn't lie the way people do. She had never met my father's lawyer. She had never been part of any of this. She had just loved me in the particular, practical way she had, saving things, keeping things, making sure there was evidence of what was real. I had what I needed. The filing I submitted to the HUD OIG took me 11 days to complete. I cross-referenced every document. I included the satellite imagery, the contractor records, the grant application with Grayfield listed as project manager, the routing of funds through Westbrook Capital, and the incorporation documents with my name listed as CFO without my consent. I included a forensic comparison done by a document examiner I paid out of the last of my savings, showing the difference in the G-loop closure between the forged addendum and 6 years of authenticated signatures. I also contacted a journalist, not a blogger, a journalist who covered financial crime at a regional investigative outlet, someone whose byline I had seen on a story about a county official 2 years ago. I sent her everything with the understanding that nothing would publish until after any federal action. I want to be clear, I did not do this for the exposure. I did it because I had learned at great cost that leverage without documentation is just noise, and documentation without witnesses is just a file that can be buried. The Westbrook opening gala was held on a Friday evening in late October. My brother had rented out the entire ground floor of a boutique hotel in the Arts District. There were fairy lights and a raw bar and a jazz trio and 60 people who thought they were celebrating a family's success story. I had been invited, actually. My brother had sent a card, handwritten, which I thought was a nice touch, saying that he hoped I had gotten some rest and that the door was always open. I think he genuinely believed I had nowhere left to go. I wore a black dress I had bought for a job interview the previous spring and arrived 20 minutes after the start time, when the room was full and comfortable and the champagne was already flowing. My mother saw me first. Her expression went through about 4 things in half a second before settling on a smile. "Callie, how wonderful. Are you feeling better?" "I'm feeling great," I said. My brother found me near the bar. He put a hand on my shoulder, light and firm, the way you touch someone you're steering. "Hey, can we talk outside for a second?" "I'd rather stay in," I said. "It's a beautiful room." My father appeared at Elliot's shoulder. He was wearing the navy blazer he always wore to events, the one with the gold buttons. He looked at me the way he always looked at obstacles, like something to be routed around. "You should go," he said quietly. "This isn't the place. You told me that at dinner once," I said. "About a different thing." I disagreed then, too. The journalist was in the room. So was the document examiner, who had agreed to be present as a professional witness. So was a contact I had made through the OIG process, a compliance officer who had been quietly building this case for 6 weeks and had asked me, specifically, to provide a date and a location where the principals would all be present. I hadn't hacked any screens. I hadn't paid anyone to make a scene. What I had done was email the compliance officer a copy of my brother's gala invitation. They had done the rest. The jazz trio was mid-song when the front doors opened. 4 people in plainclothes walked in with credentials. They were not dramatic about it. They were almost quiet. But the room went still in that particular way. Rooms go still when everyone suddenly understands that the event has changed. My father turned away from me toward the door. He turned back. I think he was calculating distances, exits, options. There weren't many. "You don't understand what you've done," he said to me. His voice was low, not angry. Worse than angry, afraid. "I understand exactly what I've done," I said. My mother was escorted from the room with her wrap still on her shoulders. My father followed, his gold-buttoned blazer moving through the crowd that parted for him automatically, the way crowds always had. My brother stood near the bar for a long moment, his hand still on his champagne glass, watching it all happen. He looked at me once. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to say that the documents hadn't already said. The aftermath took almost a year to fully resolve. The forged power of attorney was invalidated. The fraudulent grant documentation resulted in federal charges, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud a federal program, with sentencing that I won't go into detail about except to say it was significant. The Westbrook expansion was seized as an asset of the investigation. My name was removed from every filing and the equity was returned to me from the liquidated assets of my father's company. I also pursued the wrongful termination separately. My attorney sent a letter to the firm within 30 days of the OIG filing going active. They settled quietly. The Glassdoor review disappeared around the same time. My brother did not go to federal prison. He cooperated. He gave testimony about the grant structuring and Grayfield and my father's role in the notary arrangement. In exchange, he received probation and a fine. He sold his apartment. He is currently, as far as I know, working in property management in another state, which is a very particular kind of starting over for someone who once told investors he had deep roots in the community. My mother sent me a letter from the federal facility where she is serving her sentence. It was 2 pages. The word "sorry" appeared once in the second paragraph, sandwiched between a sentence about her health and a sentence about the conditions of the commissary. I read it twice. Then I put it in a box with her other correspondence, in the same storage unit where I found my grandmother's files. I kept paying the $40 a month. It feels right to have them in the same place. Last spring, I opened my own practice. It's a single office on the second floor of a building near the waterfront, with a window that lets in good light in the afternoon, and a door that has my name on it in vinyl letters I put up myself. I specialize in trust and estate accounting, which I realize sounds like the universe has a sense of irony. I am not going to tell you that I've forgiven my family. That's a word people use too quickly, I think, because it sounds like the ending of something. What I can tell you is that I understand them now in a way I didn't before. Not their choices, but the mechanism underneath. They had always believed that I was the one who didn't need things. That I was the self-sufficient one, the stable one, the one who would absorb the cost so everyone else could move forward. And because I had never pushed back, because I had always quietly absorbed, they had mistaken that for permission. I was not the one who didn't need things. I was the one who had been trained not to ask for them. That's a different sentence. I'm still learning what to do with it. My grandmother's letter is framed on the wall above my desk, not because it proved anything in court, though it did, but because she wrote it on her own, with no reason except that she was proud of me and wanted me to know it. She kept it for 6 years in a box with her utility bills and her birthday cards because she thought it mattered. She was right. It settled everything. I've thought a lot about what made my father believe he could do what he did, not the legal mechanics of it. I understand those now better than I ever wanted to. I mean the deeper thing, the belief that he could put my name on a fraudulent filing, forge my signature on a notarized document, and route stolen federal money through a company I supposedly ran, and that I would either never find out, or if I did, I would stay quiet. The answer, I think, is that he had 30 years of evidence suggesting he was right. I had always stayed quiet. I had always absorbed the cost. When my brother misreported 2 years of contractor payments and I fixed it without a word, I taught my father something. When I took on my grandmother's estate alone because no one else showed up, I taught him something. Every time I stabilized a situation that someone else had broken and asked for nothing in return, I was building a case, not for myself, but for the people who would eventually use my reliability as a weapon against me. That's the thing about being the capable one in a family. It can quietly become a role that others profit from if you're not paying attention. And I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy being useful. What changed wasn't luck. It wasn't the camera, or the storage unit, or the letter with the key loop that closed from the left. Those were tools. What actually changed was a decision I made on the floor of my kitchen, alone, with nothing left. I decided that being destroyed quietly was not the only option. That I could use the same skills that had made me valuable to them. The attention to detail, the ability to read financial documents, the patience to build a case line by line and point those skills in a different direction. Elliot had connections. My father had lawyers. What I had was 8 years of knowing exactly how money moves and exactly where it leaves marks. They had bet on my silence. I bet on their sloppiness. We were both right about what we were betting on. I don't think integrity means you never get hurt. I spent a year being very hurt, very publicly, by people who had decided my reputation was a resource they were entitled to spend. What integrity actually meant, in practice, was that when I sat down to build my case, I didn't have to invent anything. Every document I filed was real. Every signature comparison was accurate. I didn't exaggerate, didn't manipulate, didn't forge. I just found the truth and put it in front of people whose job it was to act on it. That's not a small thing. When you've been accused of being the dishonest one, of being unstable and unreliable and financially reckless, the only thing that saves you is having lived differently than they said you did. The paper trail of your actual life is either there or it isn't. Mine was there. My grandmother had made sure of that in her quiet, practical way, saving a letter in a box for 6 years because she thought it mattered. I think about Callie. About myself, sitting in that storage unit, holding a letter I had written at 24, and I think this is what it looks like when someone believes in you before you believe in yourself. She kept the evidence of who I was. When everything else had been taken or falsified or buried, that evidence was still there. The name on my office door now is the same name they tried to destroy. I put it there myself in vinyl letters on a Tuesday afternoon in good light. It turns out that's enough.